Hello everybody! For some reason, I decided to start this video behind a plant, but worry not, because it is actually going to be a pretty exciting one, because this is an RTX 4070. It's just launched, and there are quite a few cards that have triple fan designs and very high asking prices, whereas this is one of the ones that is actually available for the MSRP. This is the 4070 Dual from Palit, and you can think of this as almost like an RTX 4070 Founders, but one you'll probably actually be able to buy. And I checked this morning, and it is in stock, but the question is this actually a card that's worth buying? Is this Palit edition any good? How does the 4070 stack up against, I guess, the other cards? Not only the other 4070s, but all the other ones you can buy new and used. And do you even need a new GPU in the first place? This is something I've been wanting to discuss for ages, so I should stop banging the box and start pressing on with the video and exploring everything you need to know about the 4070 and about the Dual. Straight after a short word from this video sponsor. eBuyer is your one-stop shop for PC components, electronics, and so much more. Grab a new graphics card for gaming, SSDs for storage, or even a new TV for the living room. There are over 20,000 products available with next-day delivery and a price match promise, so you can be confident that you're getting the best value. So why not upgrade your PC today with eBuyer? Hit the link down below. Let us begin by taking this out of the box and actually showing you what it is all about. And as I say, this is a card you can actually buy today, which makes a big difference from pretty much all of the reviews we've done over the last couple of years, where it's if you try very hard, you'll be able to get hold of one. So that in itself is already a W. But as we know, these 4070s are not as cheap as they would have been like 4 years ago. I think it was the 2070 that really sort of, I guess, started to bump the price up. But with an MSRP card like this, it's pretty much going to be your best bet if you do want to go for a 4070. And as you can see, this is definitely a little bit more on the plainer side. That's not necessarily a bad thing, and I think they need to do this because you're after mass appeal. You don't want to sort of limit yourself, but that obviously is going to, not limit yourself, but it is going to potentially limit your appeal to the real high-end audience that wants something a little bit special. But as you can see, we've still got this pass-through design. You've got two fans on the front that are 95mm in size. It's actually a little bit misleading from the pictures because this is somehow both bigger and smaller than you would expect. I think the box itself suggests it's going to be really small, but when you take it out, this is kind of like 2060 sort of size. For a little brief comparison versus the Founders Edition, you can see it is actually slightly larger. I think most of them will be. This is definitely a lot smarter, and if you can get hold of one of these, I think it's pretty much going to be the option I would go for, but it depends on price and availability, really. Let's put both of these cards under the microscope for a second, though, because let's play Spot the Difference. If you haven't already noticed, there is actually a completely different power supply connection on both of these cards. This uses the traditional 8-pin method that you're almost certainly using now, and it's going to make upgrading a lot easier, a lot cleaner, especially if you've already got like custom cables or braided cables that look nice. But both of these cards still have somehow a very high and low power requirement. They're about 200 watts in operation, which is great, but the official minimum power supply from Nvidia is 650 watts, whereas I think this is about 7, maybe even 750 watts, which I don't think really makes sense. And in practical terms, you'll probably be able to get away with less, but I never like to recommend less than the minimum, so I guess take all of this as you will. Both cards also have exactly the same I/O. You've got one HDMI 2.0 and then 3 DisplayPort 1.4s. Again, if you go for the brand new AMD cards, you can get DisplayPort 2.1, which is more future-proof, but in practical terms probably isn't going to make any difference to anyone because the amount of GPU horsepower that they have won't really be able to drive any games at those resolutions and refresh rates anyway. But again, it's sort of up to you and the monitor that you want to buy. It doesn't seem as if we have any form of BIOS switch, so there's no like one toggle overclocking or anything, but obviously you can use the free tools and it will dynamically boost anyway. And in case you're interested in a little size comparison, the 4070 FE is the smallest, then you've got the Dual, then you've got the Gaming OC from Gigabyte, and then stepping up to a card that basically costs double, here we've got the 4080 Founders Edition with the third-party versions of this actually getting even bigger. It's pretty insane. But enough mucking about with comparisons, let's actually see how this thing performs, and of course how it looks in our system. As we say, this is all white, so it's not the usual card I'd go for. But actually, it does draw attention to it, and it sort of goes with the black of the motherboard. So actually, I think that looks quite nice. You use some black and white cables, not too shabby. Oh look, I've got to swap this out, because this is a 12-pin. Ah yes, the lovely familiarity of the 8-pin. The only issue, of course, with a single 8-pin is sometimes you have the extra cable that you need to tuck away, but I would actually say that fits the rig really well. I was genuinely worried I was making this video and I've gone, oh no, I've used a white PC, it's gonna be a disaster. But that actually looks quite good, doesn't it? What do you think? Am I right? Am I wrong? Does this work? Would you do this? I'm genuinely really excited to see what this looks like turned on now. I mean, I don't think it will change much. Just this little strip of RGB. But sometimes less is more. Unless, of course, you're talking about the PC Centric mouse mat that is actually now shipping. Link is down below, limited quantity. Once this is gone, it's gone forever. You won't be able to buy it, so check it out today. We have light, there we go. Maybe it's not RGB, maybe it's just a white strip. That would be a plot twist, wouldn't it? It's genuinely quite weird how it's worked out so well for a black and white build. Like this even matches the RGB RAM. Boom, we're in. This is an i7-13700K. Should be all the CPU horsepower you need for a rig like this. Let's play some games. And let us begin with a game I know you want us to test. Some Call of Duty Warzone 2. Resurgence? I don't know what the confusion is about. It's the smaller island, all right? And I have heard time and time again that you want to see this with some more competitive settings. So if you want to see 4070 Ultra, watch the previous video that we made where we actually tested all of this. That video you can find in the top right corner of your screen. But here we've got this on the balanced preset with DLSS set to balanced, but then the textures turned up to high, but everything else I think has been left alone. And as you can see, the frame rate is around about 100, 110 FPS, but don't forget that this is actually running at 4K resolution, which, depending on who you ask, either is or isn't a 4K card. Bear in mind this is essentially 3080 performance. That was a 4K card, but because this is a 70 series, it's technically a 1440p card. So how about you forget everything that you know and just focus on the performance, which is actually very, very good if you do want to play this on a 4K screen. Because yes, you're not going to sort of be able to get the absolute highest frame rate ever, but I don't think anyone's really going to be complaining at, what's that, about 130 frames a second at a 4K DLSS resolution. That's pretty cool, actually. Oh, that is a sniper rifle. I didn't realise that. But let's very quickly go and turn the resolution down to 1440p, because I would wager that you're probably going to be playing Warzone at 1440p. And what difference does that actually make to our frame rate? Quite a lot. And this is why a lot of people say, why don't you test this with competitive settings? Because you get a much higher frame rate when you turn everything down a bit. So now we're getting about 213 frames a second. Obviously it will depend on the CPU that you get as well. I think the i9 or maybe even an i5 is a good pairing, but I wouldn't really go anything under that. But clearly, if you do want to get like a 1440p, 165 Hz monitor, play Call of Duty Warzone, as long as you are prepared to turn some of the settings down a little bit, I think you are going to be very happy. I mean, I do actually want to go and change the DLSS from balanced to quality, just to see how much difference this makes, because personally, this is how I would choose to play at 1440 rather than balanced. It has lowered our frame rate slightly, but we're still pretty much hitting that magical 165 FPS mark. It's not actually made a drastic difference. You're getting all of that lovely sharpness of 1440p resolution. It's obviously slightly softer because it's got DLSS, but there's not really that much in it. I think overall this is a very good competitive way to play Warzone, and everyone would be very happy with the frame rate here. But let's press on to our second multiplayer title, some Halo Infinite. And this is a game that does not have any DLSS. I'm talking to you, DLSS hater. So let us proceed into the multiplayer battleground, and we're currently getting around about 75 frames a second at 4K, but this is the high preset, not ultra. So you definitely can notice quite a big difference versus the higher end GPUs, anything really from what, like a 7900 XT or something like an RTX, even the 4070 Ti, but definitely the 4080. They are definitely a world away really when it comes to performance for playing at 4K at really high refresh rates. But to be fair, I don't think this is in any way bad. It's just clearly fourth in the stack when it comes to performance. You're still getting 4K at over 60 frames a second, which a few years ago, I think everyone really would be jumping and cheering in the air about. But if you do want to play, I guess, on a 4K TV with a controller, like to be fair, I did with Halo with the campaign, then you can actually dynamically limit the resolution so you can get 120 frames a second at all times in this game. And on a TV, you're not really going to notice a difference. But if you're playing on a 4K monitor, you're probably going to want to turn it down to 1440p. So let us do just that and see what the difference is. Hit the save button, and I'm expecting a very big difference. And yeah, sure enough, we're now getting about 110, 120 frames a second. So not as high as we were getting at Warzone with those competitive settings, but obviously you could still lower this down a little bit more if you wanted to. I guess this is quite a good example then of a game that doesn't have DLSS or FSR, so you can sort of see that you are going to be not in any way limited, but you won't have quite as high a frame rate as you would if those technologies were here and enabled. But still, very competitive, not really a big problem, but I guess some people, if you're spending £580, maybe would expect slightly more, but this is just currently the situation we find ourselves in. Right, let's move on to some more hardcore games, shall we? This is Returnal, and the reason I wanted to show this is not only because I've just finished the game, like loads and loads of times, and seen the secret ending. Yes, there is a secret ending. Was it worth it? Maybe not. It wasn't anything to do with that, it's because this was originally a PlayStation 5 game. So this is going to be a nice sort of comparison to show, I guess, the performance of this versus the performance you might get from a PlayStation 5. This is running at 4K with DLSS, so this should look and feel quite a lot better than you'd find on the PlayStation 5. And in terms of performance, we're getting, what's that, about 65, 70 frames a second? Which, bear in mind, this is running at the Epic preset, which is as high as it will go, with ray traced reflections, ray traced ambient occlusion, pretty much, well, everything that you can enable. I think this is a very, very nice death. If you do want to turn this down a little bit and maximize performance, let's change it to 1440p. Keep the changes, and are we going to get over 100 now? Our survey says yes, around about 100, 120 frames a second for what I still say is one of the best looking games you can actually get on PC at the moment. So all in all, I'm actually pretty impressed with this. If you haven't played Returnal, I would highly advise checking it out. And if you do have a ray tracing compatible GPU, then this is quite a nice little one, not only to test, but to actually play. How about we move on to a game I know you guys are playing and I haven't really got too far into yet, some Hogwarts Legacy. As you can see with Patrice Plot, we're gonna continue his adventure. And let's start by having a look at the settings. So this is running at 4K. We'll use DLSS performance for now, as this is sort of gonna replicate, I guess, 1440p with DLSS. We'll make sure everything is set to Ultra, and we've actually got ray traced reflections on, shadows off, and ambient occlusion on. So this is some pretty hardcore settings actually. And in terms of performance, we're actually still getting a very high frame rate. I will confess, I didn't actually expect that. This is absolutely one of those times when the 4070 is incredibly impressive, because it really does show what it is capable of. Being able to run a game like this, something you're actually going to sink hours and hours into, while still maintaining a very high frame rate, but having all of those features as well. It's pretty smart, and the best bit is, this actually isn't with DLSS frame generation, so I think we can get an even higher frame rate by turning this on. You are going to increase your latency ever so slightly, but for a game like this, it's not really going to make masses of difference. As long as you can sort of hit about 50, 55 milliseconds of latency, that's going to be absolutely fine. And sure enough, here you are. Look, you're hitting pretty much 100 frames a second, just under about 90 to 99 FPS. That is pretty smart, isn't it? I mean, it's actually quite interesting as well, because we are slightly CPU bottlenecked here, even with a 13700K. So it is going to depend on the game that you're going to want to play. I still say that this is probably the right pairing, but if you want to go like all out, obviously you'd be looking at something like a 7800X 3D, but then that's going to cost you more money. So yeah, depends on the game you're going to play. We do, of course, also need to do ourselves a little acoustic noise test. Basically the same as all of the others that I've tested. I can hear the CPU cooler and the case fans really about the same sort of level, so no issues with this whatsoever. And to be fair, the GPU temperature is higher on this card than you'll find on some of the others, around about 69 degrees or so, but this is still just like not an issue whatsoever, especially when it is that quiet. I mean, it's quieter now, we've actually put the side panel on. Personally speaking, if I was looking to purchase a 4070 and I wanted one that had an 8-pin, as I say, absolutely no issues with this at all. But before we jump into the benchmarks, I do actually want to try overclocking this and see if we can get a slightly higher frame rate. So let's have ourselves a little test, shall we? We've turned DLSS off completely. Frame gen is still on, but super resolution is off just so we can essentially max out the GPU. We're currently running at exactly 60 frames a second, which is going to be nice and easy to remember. And our GPU clock is about 2625 or so. 2700 there. We'll open up MSI Afterburner and we'll add plus 100 to the core clock and 50 to the memory. And does that make any difference once it loads back in? It's given us an extra 1 frame per second. Not a bad start. Not game changing though, is it? Can we go any higher? 275 memory, hit apply. GPU's now at 2835. Frame rate 62 frames a second, so you can see it climbing up there. What happens if we add 300? This is quite an extreme difference now. If I was overclocking this properly, I would want to do it a lot slower than that because, as you can see, the game crashes. But it gives you an idea, I suppose, of what you'll be able to add, anywhere really between about 150, 250 probably. But it's going to depend on the game and how willing you are to have it crash, because it might be stable for 2 hours, but if it crashes then and you're playing multiplayer, that's still no good. But I know what you're thinking. This gameplay's all well and good, but I want hard numbers. I want the nerdy charts. I want to see how this performs versus the other cards. Well, fortunately for you, there's one person that's very well equipped to walk you through all of the numbers and charts. It's the one, the only, Benchmarkers. Hello everyone, this is Benchmarkers back again to bring you some numbers, and as you can see straight from the off, both the Gigabyte, the Founders and the Palit all essentially perform the same. There are some differences, not massive, but clearly they're actually quite consistent. The Founders Edition is middle of the road, the Palit is at the bottom of the pile, and the Gigabyte is slightly stronger. But bear in mind the prices of these cards are actually going to be completely different. I think that the Palit Dual is actually a surprisingly enticing option, because as long as you are willing to go and overclock this slightly with the sliders, which, let's be honest, isn't really any sort of hassle or issue at all, then you can get the top level performance, if not slightly better than the Gigabyte, without really having to spend any money whatsoever. And before we've actually started filming this video, the prices of this card have actually started to come down drastically. At the time of filming, the best price I can find in the UK is £560. So if you can get this card for a bargain price, then it is definitely worth considering. I mean, its performance is pretty good in all resolutions. Okay, it's definitely not the best 4K card. While it may have been marketed this way a few years ago, the 70 series is very much a high 1440p card, but pretty much every single game, every resolution, and even the new features with things like DLSS 3.0, ray tracing, it just performs quite well as an all-rounder. It's not going to be the absolute best, but I think for what most people actually need, which is decent 1440p performance in multiplayer, and then maybe a little bit extra strength for those sort of eye candy games where you do want to turn everything up, is a really strong all-rounder, and it is genuinely highly recommended. The main thing that I would strongly caution you about though is the fact that there are going to be other cards coming, not only a direct competitor for this from AMD, but cheaper cards that should have even better value for money than this. And if you don't need to play at high 1440p or 4K resolution, then why buy a graphics card that has extra performance but costs you more when you're not going to be able to use that performance? To really put this into perspective, we've made up our classic cost per frame graphs, and you can see that while the previous generation of RX 6700 XT is still the champion of the new higher end graphics cards, these 4070s actually do offer significantly better value for money than anything else really we've seen so far this year, and if we are going to see price drops, then obviously this value is going to only increase further. The only other things to note are power usage, thermals and acoustics, and as you can see the 4070 absolutely smashes it when it comes to performance per watt. There is quite literally nothing that beats this at the time of filming, but again this will probably change with cheaper GPUs, and to be honest I wouldn't really mind which of these cards I had in my system. So there we are then, the 4070 and the 4070 Palit Dual. Both of these cards are recommended if you're after this level of performance. But if you're watching this video and you're wondering whether the 4070 is worth buying, then I would say yes, it is probably the card I would be looking at myself. It is better value than pretty much everything else that has released so far, but you don't need to rush into it. There are going to be extra cards coming that will be even better value from this, but all round, if you're happy with the performance of this, I don't really have any issues with it, other than I still think a 70 class GPU should be cheaper, but that doesn't matter. That is not the landscape that we're in right now. We can't do anything about it. So if you're looking for 4070 performance at the lowest possible price, the Palit Dual does come recommended. But what do you guys think? Have I got this right? Have I got it wrong? Have Nvidia got it right? I would absolutely love to hear your thoughts down in the comment section below. And if you have or are going to pick up a graphics card, what is it? What are you waiting for? What have you bought? We'd love to hear from you. Absolutely smash the like button if you enjoyed this, get yourself subscribed, and of course if you do want to check out current pricing on anything featured in this video, you can find that link down below with my Amazon affiliate links. And while you're down there, why not check out eBuyer? eBuyer are UK-based suppliers of PC components that have been running for over 20 years, with fast customer response times, 6 million registered users, and the price match promise. Delivery can be as quick as the next day, and everything comes wrapped safe and securely so you can enjoy your new parts without any fuss. Get your build on today with eBuyer, just hit the link down below. Thank you so much for checking out this video. We'll catch you in the next one.